tell me, what did it look like when you were at Capable? How did you know when you'd reached QTS Plus?
For me personally, it was a case of I developed much more confidence. So through the research and through everything we've talked about prior, I felt in a much better position. And you look at the journey, looking back at where I was at unaware, and looking to this stage now, I'm much more independent, I'm much more confident. And then I started really, and again, for me it was progress, not perfection. And it's always evaluating. It's not just, an end result. Constantly evaluating, constantly reflecting, constantly adapting to the learners in front of me. And it was a case of looking at them assessment points. And then when it came to our DIRT task, which gave the learners the opportunity to reflect on their learning and seeing the impact on their progress made, I then started incorporating stuff like, what does a good one look like? What does a bad one look like? And again, role modelling answers, where then I'm giving the learners the opportunity now to see for themselves, using the success criteria, okay, they've done this, however, in order to improve, they need to do this. In order to develop even further, they need to act on this advice. And they're seeing for themselves then, through the eyes of myself, Mark, in the work, okay, this is what Sir is looking for. And then when they go into their final draft, then you can see the difference between their first drafts and their final drafts then. And for me, them role model answers were very, very important, because they could see exactly what I was looking for.
I think for me, the biggest thing was actually having that class full time in front of me, moving beyond the data. So going back to what we were discussing earlier at the unaware stage, when you're given the data and you're not quite sure what to do with it, I think when you're at QTS Plus, moving on from Capable, you're really understanding the data that isn't actually given to you, that still is data. The students in front of you, who are they? What do they look like when they're having a good day? What do they look like when they're having a bad day? How do you, as their classroom teacher, respond to that? And I think that's really a big difference between being sort of effective at the Capable stage, where you're really understanding what the data is, and then at the QTS Plus stage, being highly effective, using the data to inform you, but understanding that there's a much bigger picture to that student than the number that is actually on the page. What do they need from you? And how do you give it to them? I think that's a really important message there for me in moving between those two stages.
And I agree, it's like with the data, that's just a very small window to a much larger picture, and you've got so many other factors considered. What's that learner in front of you, what are they going through at the moment, behaviour as well, attitude to learning outside of school as well. There's just so many different factors. And again, as you said, at QTS level is the opportunity of having your own class and developing that professional rapport with them, and developing that trust, where there's a mutual respect then, where you can gain a great understanding. Whereas I feel like at a PGCE stage is you kind of have that relationship start to build, and then all of a sudden then, you're out for a couple of lessons and then you've got to come back in, and it's kind of like, it's a little bit disjointed. Whereas at QTS you have that real opportunity now to develop that professional rapport.
Yeah, definitely. Teaching is definitely trust, and as you said, when you're in and out, it's hard to build that trust. When you get when you get your own class, it's nice to have that trust there, build it up over time to understand the learners in front of you. I think I definitely spent a lot of time, or have spent a lot of time, liaising with the different key members of staff around the school as well. So I've got a class that quite difficult, is low in numbers, there's 10 students in the class, need a lot of nurturing. With that class, I liaise quite a lot with the pastoral manager, which isn't something I would have thought of doing at all when I was in the unaware stage. So liaising with them to understand what is the full picture of that student, to really, as I said, get to the core of what the student needs, how to help them, how to provide for them.
So importantly, usually, occasionally student teachers in the PGCE year might achieve QTS Plus before they get to their NQT year. But just thinking about the NQT year itself, obviously where you've got less support from a classroom mentor, what made the difference to you progressing in your learning and in your practice in this particular strand, in a context where you had less support from a mentor? What were you doing that made the difference?
Again, it's a case of, like we said, you haven't got the subject mentor in the room with you. You're on your own, and I think it's really getting to know the learners in front of you. If you go into an NQT year, you've got a brand new class and you don't know the pupils that well, I would go out my way and get to know them and conduct one-to-one pupil interviews, and really understand what their strengths are, what their areas for development, and then you've got an action plan then moving forward. Okay, this is what we're going to do. And it's, again, is that clear pathway to then understanding what I'm expecting from the learner and what the learner's expecting from myself as well. So it's a two-way street. But definitely one-to-one pupil interviews, you know, I do in my GCSE classes as well, where it's a case of getting that ground level of, okay, what does the pupil expect from myself? What do I expect from the pupil? And is this establishing them expectations right from the beginning? And I think as long as you're consistent and as long as you set them high expectations throughout, then that is going a long way then when it comes to developing that relationship.
Yeah, I think in the NQT year, I'm very lucky to have a senior mentor, and as well as a head of department who's also my mentor. So I do have that mentor time. But what I'm making sure that I'm doing is that I'm reflective on what it is that I'm trying to do, again, referring back to that evaluation, but using everything that I was actually taught as I worked my way through these stages as well, because you don't actually reach a stage and stop learning. It's about continuing to work through it. So now when I'm evaluating and thinking about a lesson, I'm using the same sort of frameworks and asking myself the same questions that I was asking myself early on. So even though I don't have a mentor, the mentor was the scaffolding that I needed to be independent. I'm not thinking any differently. I'm just maybe not having that vocal dialogue with a mentor in front of me, but I'm still working through the same internal processes for the same reasons.